I started sharing this story on Twitter last night, but I feel like at this point I need to share a video because I feel like there's just a really misunderstanding of power dynamics in this Watson situation, irrespective of how you feel on this case. Um, they're a real thing and they're very real with NFL players. And there's a lot that you can read up on that, but I'll share my personal experience just to offer some insight here. I had a legitimately traumatic experience in college involving a then NFL player trying to assault my friend at a bar a multitude of times, refusing to take no for an answer. And it was the first time I really understood how much there was an imbalance of power in these types of situations and a physical outmatch that also can't be ignored here. He came into this bar with his friend and he essentially zeroed in on my friend from the get go. And from then on, it was his for the taking, essentially. At first, it seemed innocuous. He approached her at the bar, very close to her, and was trying to buy her a drink. She tried to politely decline, explaining that she had a boyfriend, but she was one of those people that kind of froze up in situations like that, and I could kind of see her panicked eyes just looking around for us to help. And so we did. And immediately at that, and it's something I think about a lot of the time, is, not so much a silver lining in this case, but it really was powerful to me how much we immediately came together, despite how scary and real this situation was. And to be frank, one that we were under the influence dealing with. She was uncomfortable. We were uncomfortable. She had expressed, to me privately how uncomfortable she was and how much she didn't know what to do and needed our help. But quite frankly, we were all kind of frozen there, looking at the size of this guy and just recognizing that, what were we going to do to make him go away? She would keep coming over and trying to reinsert herself into our group of friends on the other side of the bar. And now all of a sudden, he is right there, positioning himself quite literally in the middle of the two of us, getting really close to her, putting his arm around her. And I could see literal panic in her eyes, and I could see her absolutely freezing. And I've talked about this on Twitter before, but fight, flight, those are not the only two responses. There are two others, one of them being freeze. And that is what she was experiencing in that moment. And we all were to a degree. So we're all just standing there in close proximity trying to figure out, how do we insert ourselves? How do we get him to go away? How do we have any power here? And before we know it, we see him literally going in and trying to kiss her. And her little, who I still think is a badass to this day, without stuttering, just threw her drink right at them and played it off like she was totally dumb. He did not think that we were being totally dumb. And I could already see that he was starting to get a little angry at us, but it did buy us a little bit of time to reassess what we were going to do. So immediately we think, just get away from him, right? Like, there's a drink. Oh my God, we're so sorry. Let's just walk away right now. So we went over to a pool table over in the corner. And as she was sitting on it, without 5 seconds going by, I turn around and he is in between her legs, pushing her up on this pool table. And I could just see absolute, again, panic in her eyes, her body language moving back, and him just leering forward and essentially cornering her. And I could maybe reconcile with the, inappropriate actions at the bar, because that's what we as women often have to do. But this to me was him boxing her into a corner and physically trying to assert his dominance. And at this point, this is where the power dynamics became unignorable. He was over 6 feet tall, over 200 pounds, looming over us with a very angry look in his face. And quite frankly, you could just tell that we were getting in his way and he did not like that at all. And that's where all of this kind of led to. So at this point, I had had enough, and I almost to a painful degree insert myself in these situations where, I have no regard for the physical safety, the fact that I'm 5'3". I was a little bigger then, I guess, but, now I'm basically just a twig to these guys. But I see my friend in legitimate danger. So I just strutted over there with the confidence of 1,000 suns that I should not have had in this situation. I got in his face. I said things that were probably not necessarily the best thing because they were a little antagonistic, but I was mad. I was a mad person at this happening, and I'm not going to mince my words. To summarize in kind terms, I told him to GTF the hell out of this situation, that my friend had said no several times. I could hear it from across the bar. She told you she had a boyfriend. What entitlement do you think that you have to just be able to assert total control over the situation despite all of this? And I could see the rage growing in his face, and most people would say this is the time that you back away. And I just decided to say everything with my whole chest that I wanted to say. And I went off on him about, the fact that just because he's an NFL player, it doesn't mean that he has his say at any girl he wants. I made some, comments about his position and his ability to play, which were probably out of left field, but I was feeling some type of way, and I could just see his rage in the eyes turning red, and I sincerely thought he was going to knock me out at one point. I am not being dramatic about that. I think about that all the time. But we took this as we're running into the girls' bathroom and we're just going to hide in there and figure out what we're going to do next. And we went in there and my friend starts breaking down. She's like, I thank you so much. I had no idea what to do. I don't know what we're going to do now. He seems like he, isn't going to give this up. And unfortunately, we were very right when we came out of the bathroom. Say we were in there for a good 15 minutes, just decompressing and frankly hoping he would leave. And instead, we come out to find out that he has positioned himself right at the exit door, squared towards us, and is at this point directed his anger towards me, which was really scary, and is just staring us down at the only way out. And we were in college. This was within walking distance, and this was not something that we knew what to do and how to safely get out of this. And there has been not another time in my life where I felt that acute amount of safety when I'm inside a public place. And by this point, the male bouncers decided it would be an opportune time to get involved just by probably seeing all of this, came over to us, and we begged them, we are terrified right now. We explained what happened, and we're like, and there he is by the door. We don't feel safe leaving. Can you please escort us out of here? And they were scared to do so. They called in their backup to be able to walk past this guy staring at us all with and with every fiber in my being screaming at me to go the other direction with four guys at this point in front of us. We walked towards the exit. I did not look at him once, and we got outside and we ran down a side street. We ran down another side street. We paused. We hid in a bush. This might not all sound rational, but that is the legitimate fear that we were feeling in that moment. And my friend starts hysterically crying. She's like, I could not even process that. I had to take her home. We stayed up for hours just trying to go over how unokay all of this was. And she felt a lot of guilt and shame and freaking out over why she froze and why she couldn't do anything in that moment. And she felt so stupid about it. And quite frankly, we all froze for a really long period of time, because what do you do when you're a group of small girls against, again, a huge guy that is clearly identified what he wants and that he does not care what we have to say about it? I will say I have yet to experience that in this context, with another professional sports player, but that experience to me has stuck with me for 7 years now. And I've gone through a lot of trauma since then, and I've gone probably through worse actual personal trauma, but that one really has stuck with me the most, just in terms of tangible real fear in that moment that wasn't really even directed to me in terms of being, the target of affection here. I was just the one that got in the way and said what I felt like saying to this guy who was not happy with a single thing that I said and was really pissed at me for screwing up his plan to, overpower my friend at some point in time, be it through physical or just the psychological dominance that, again, she could not get over the fact that she froze about. And it's something we talked about 4 or 5 years ago when I saw her years after. And it shaped all of our worldviews. It shaped my worldview. It shattered a level of safety for me. I thought I felt at a very comforting place. It shattered my belief in the fact that being in a public setting where there are, not just other people around, but guys around, guys working, guys in not the same position of power, but certainly more than I was, to be able to intervene. And all of that aside, what stuck out to me the most was for someone that wasn't a star quarterback. And again, I'm not implying this here. I'm just saying with the little power and prestige that he had, it was all channeled towards this feeling of entitlement and asserting this power dynamic over a group of small women under the influence who I just think they were banking on us not making a stink about. And if not really for my insertion towards the end, we had all kind of entered a state of a fight or flight freeze ourselves. And this power dynamic and this, why didn't they say no? Why didn't they stop? Why didn't they leave? I hope this can get at least provide an anecdote for those questions, for why someone might freeze up in an instance of literal fear for their life, for the fact that they might be assaulted if it's in a private place, for us that we would be followed home after the fact. We didn't know what he was going to do. We were really out of our absolute depth there. So I just want to go through like the power dynamics that are at play in this situation, not to assert guilt or inferences on this case, because I've done enough of that, and I have admitted that my personal experiences may or may not be clouding my judgment, but at least I'm trying to be self-aware and introspective, which I think we could all learn a lesson from. So, like, to start with the first and obvious, the quarterback is the most powerful position on the field. Most NFL starters are very powerful people. It's something that, is instilled from, college on. When you are the hometown hero, you bring your team to a championship, everyone loves you. It breeds an unhealthy environment in general of this feeling, of power and almost, a kind of this godlike sense. At least at first with younger guys. It's not to say they mature out of that. And that's not, again, to apply anything. This is just a general thematic things that play here. I used to work in jury consulting. We look at, the psychological factors that play in cases. That's what that job is on its face. And so my intentions here are just kind of to discuss what these are, theoretically with reference to the case, just for context, but not to imply anything further. And so again, that power dynamic, it's not specific to quarterback. It's not specific to Deshaun Watson, but it is relevant to the fact that it is the most powerful position on the field. As you get up power chains, higher positions of power tend to breed more connotations with that association of power and how that, can affect someone's psyche. The second issue here, and one non-specific to this case necessarily, it's an issue in general in this industry. And if you read up on this case again, I highly suggest that you do so. One not specific to this situation, it is an issue, with sports players in general. And it's just simply the connotation of this massage therapy industry with sex work. And the fact that this is something that these women have to deal with on a consistent basis. And then you add in the fact that these women that are described in these civil complaints largely are unestablished therapists trying to build a clientele. They're not, employed regularly through NFL teams. These either came through, alleged referrals or from, direct DMs on Instagram. And it would be one thing if these women weren't massage therapists and, received these messages out of left field. But the fact of the matter is they were. And so, even if it seemed unorthodox, the power dynamics again, and the fact that, these women wanting to establish and grow their careers, having a high profile NFL player really bolsters that. And that's something that, I think is ignored in this case, and kind of that pressure, and also want to please a very high profile client that you don't have large experience having a clientele base of. And on that note, when you are largely unestablished, you don't want to make a stink about something like this. I mean, look at, just the general reaction to this in general, and the frankly, hostile approach to the credibility of a lot of these women. It's just not something that people want to say and defend, because it's exhausting. I sat on my own personal story for a long time, A, because it was traumatizing, B, because it was just something I still had to work through and reconcile, and it's not something I necessarily wanted to put out there. I went into this industry from another one in which I had a very strong moral compass, and I was an advocate to a fault. It made me kind of leave the profession I was in, realizing that I just couldn't help but be an advocate to a detriment of my career. And that's, what I have kind of decided to do here. I actually did kind of bring it up in vague terms the first time all of this surfaced, and I made, comments about my feelings on this, and, to say the reaction was unwelcome is putting it mildly. And so, I've just kind of shut up about it, because I felt like it doesn't matter, and it's only going to make these attacks more difficult and more impossible for me to try to cover the situation reasonably, objectively, and, without honestly having my emotions and my traumatic experiences affect my career viability at this point. But now it feels crucial to do so, if nothing else, just to give another example of how this can all be commingled with power dynamics associated with this profession, with, the accolades and the admiration that comes along with it, but also just, the literal physical dominance and the empower in that. And so going over, the power imbalances with respect to, the kind of the psychological aspect, just to focus on the literal physical fears that women experienced in confined situations where they are alone with someone who is expressing and acting in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable, makes you feel threatened. And as those actions escalate, you start to wonder, at what point am I able to try to come up with an escape plan that isn't going to lead to this escalating and me making this more unsafe than it already is. Even if that's not rational in every situation that it presents itself in, that's an experience that women assess and weigh all the time for so many reasons. And I could pull up the statistics till I'm blue in the face, but I'm not going to defend the fact that women feel scared and outmatched when they are alone with, a man larger than none and an athlete at that who is much more so. So, you have fear over the viability of your profession, over the credibility in your career, over the fact that you saying something about this or making too much of a stink of it might taint that. That is the number one as to why there's no ability to give consent in a situation like this. When that power comes in the form of an employment-related situation, that is an imbalance, and that means that consent cannot be freely given. When someone is in a situation where they are feared for their well-being and they don't feel that they have the ability to say no because they are terrified of what happens if they don't, and that has been preceded by alleged, acts that have, exposed things and made it very clear, what may have, been the intent of coming next. You fight, you flight, you freeze, or you fawn. Those are the 4 responses to traumatic. But I've seen all of this stuff about these being false allegations and, innocent until proven guilty. And I am all for that. But I am also for, looking again at fact patterns of behavior that imply a predatory nature. And I am inclined to explore that. And I just want to go over, what the parameters here are that could be false. It is not that he has outright denied meeting with any of these women or that any of these incidents took place. It's that he has admitted that sexual acts have transpired, but his defense is that they are consensual. And to me, that is the crux of the issue here. So the people that are saying this is just creepy behavior, this is not any, sexual acts of any nature, that is literally what their defense is resting on. It is that the, very muddy issue of consent, and it is, the strategy that you really argue in these cases. So while I try my best to have these discussions in good faith, I just need those all to be operating under the parameters of which now the defendant and his attorney have provided here. The defense that's been provided here. The defense isn't that none of these actions took place whatsoever. It's that they were consensual. I am sympathetic to false accusations. I have friends that have gone through this personally. I have gone through situations where they are involved, and I know the severity of, what that is when it's the case. The fact of the matter is, it is oftentimes not the case. And not only that, I'm just frankly not sure what we are trying to imply as false here, other than the fact that either these women took this the wrong way or that they indeed agreed to consent. And from what I have read, they have not done so. So yes, this is a he said, she said, but it's a he said, she said that has so many complicating factors that don't make it equal. When they say the was consensual, they have not clarified what that means remotely. Was express consent given? Because if express consent is not given, consent is not implied. This is something that we have been trying to, make a universal understanding now for years. If you are unsure if consent is present in a situation, it is not there. Unless you have had an exchange that expressly gives consent, it is not there. Implied consent is not a thing. And even if we are just gonna, slightly entertain this implied consent thing, that is when I bring in the power dynamics here related to literal physical dominance, the confinement of space, and the employment related dynamics that all also mean consent cannot be given in those scenarios. And those are the power dynamics here. The power of NFL players and athletes in general, the power of having, again, isolation of someone, and the dynamics of an employment related thing. Consent is not given in these cases. So that is where I am at personally. I respect if you feel otherwise, but I also hope that you could respect this trail of thought and read what is in front of you and try to see this as a holistic thing. NFL investigators, who were two women, by the way, which is honestly the most disappointing thing about this entire situation to me. What questions did they ask these women? What were you wearing and why did you freeze? And I think that just says it all. Not even going to bother unpacking the what were they wearing thing because, my God, that is at this point a almost laughable cliche. But why they froze? Freezing is a way to survive. It is a primal thing instilled in us that a lot of creatures that were unable to outfight their predators learn to either play dead or play dead. That's pretty much what it was. And that is what we are doing through that freeze response. You can say that, this number is distorted, that not all of these women are alleging things that happened. And that's, I can somewhat see that perspective, but it's the people that look at the allegations of, one of the women providing oral sex to him and the fact that she did this. I've actually seen someone say, why doesn't he sue her for sexual assault? And people wonder why this is hard for women to talk about on any forum. And that kind of response is precisely why. Should these events happened as alleged, and again, with the fact that even if these things took place, there was no ability to give consent in the first place. But the fact that these women did that is a survival tactic, and it is one that can save your life sometimes. And it is one that more than any other response makes women feel absolute guilt, shame, and blame for the fact that they didn't fight back. That, did they want this? Is this something that they brought on to themselves? Why didn't I run away? I thought I was a strong woman. And it shatters so many things for people. And it's just really troubling to see the response to this be so callous and dismiss what coercion is, and why someone giving oral sex to someone isn't always a consensual act. It's the nuance that is just completely lost here that really has disturbed me to my core. And it's why people ask why I've been so emotional, and that I've frankly been aggressive towards Deshaun Watson. And maybe I have been, but I have hopefully pled my case here as to why I am willing to stand on the side of the women in this case. And to me, why there are so many dynamics here that, again, if there has been admittance by the defendant that these sexual acts occurred and the defense is they were consensual, I cannot get on board with the false allegation standpoint unless this is a mass conspiracy being committed by 22 women that do not all work for the same company. It is my understanding they are not all in different states, but please do not quote me on that, and I will double check that. But the idea that they are doing this for, money and personal gain, that argument is so wild to me. It is such the exception to the rule. Have you seen all of this and thought to yourself, this is exactly what those women wanted? That they didn't think this was exactly what was going to happen? Trying to prosecute either in a criminal sense or get justice in civil court for sexual assault is without question the most traumatizing and near impossible feat for women to take on. It is always that their credibility is attacked. It is always that they are slut shamed, that they are questioned about what they're wearing from a league that purports to support women in sports. I mean, you hire female investigators and ask those types of questions. Don't look me in the face and tell me that you respect me in this industry. So just, again, my personal stance here is that knowing all I know, being a woman, knowing how these things go, knowing friends that have tried to prosecute, knowing friends that have had much more traumatic experiences than mine, I can understand why they wouldn't want to ever say a word about this. And I just wish that the general consensus to this wasn't that this is a money grab and an attention grab, because it is just so rarely the case. And just all of the trauma and the way that women are treated when they do this. And that's ignoring the fact that he is a high profile NFL player who a lot of people want on their sports teams. I get that, but try to be cognizant of that at least. And I would rather people say, I just don't care, or I'm just not willing to look at this right now. But to say that, this is an obvious or, err on the side of these women making it up, please take it from a woman. And if nothing else, if my perspective can give nothing else, that to me is so not the case. It just feels like, and this is, very personal, and this is just me speaking from the heart right now. It feels like believe women unless they're accusing someone that is a football player. And that's just how I generally feel. And it's, you see how he gets linked to one team and then a next team, how female reporters they're not even at this point, trying to make inferences on the case. They are just trying to say, please be kind and understand why we are all being traumatized here by our own personal experiences being brought up into this. Please consider yourselves lucky that you don't have to feel like this and have to have these traumatic experiences be brought to the surface and really treated just so callously when you try to offer any of them in public. But mainly what has stuck out to me most is the lack of understanding of what power dynamics really mean. I would encourage you to read a specific Sports Illustrated article about this problem going beyond Deshaun Watson, which I am happy to share it. I'm also happy to, go back through my own work and work on these types of cases and try to offer some psychological insight, if nothing else, on what power dynamics are and how they relate to cases like this and the paramount issue of consent. And I'm really at my limit. And regardless of where he goes, regardless of how this all turns out, my hope is that in sharing this and being so candid and vulnerable and probably stupidly at that to a bunch of strangers on Twitter, everyone would, suggest that's not the case. But if I can not change one person's mind, but at least help them be more open to considering, things they might not understand here and have the ability to understand here from so many aspects of this. And, a lot of that being, a painful female perspective on this, then I hope that I've done something here. This goes past this case to me. It's, the treatment of women in sports, the treatment of the female opinion in sports, female sports fans, and just really the dismissal of this every time this comes up. And it doesn't mean that I excuse past sexual assault situations. And I get asked that a lot on here. And I don't think people always consider, the demanding of, my explaining of the nuances between, Jameis Winston, Ben Roethlisberger. I am more than happy at this point to answer a Q&A just to get this all out of, my hair. But to get that type of stuff on every one of these tweets is just so exhausting. it makes you have to open up so many wounds. Those things do bother me, and I've talked about them in the past. But just because things have happened in the past doesn't mean that we get to just move on forward now with something of this magnitude in the number of allegations, the duration in which they happened, and the implications of that. If these are true, this is an active predatory pattern of behavior that doesn't seem to have shown, any reason to have stopped. I've gotten a lot of hate and DMs and harassment, and I'm not trying to make this about me, but what stuck out to me more is the messages I've gotten thanking me, sharing their experiences. It's been very emotional and overwhelming to me, and it makes me feel like I have a moral responsibility to continue to share my thoughts on this as, attempted respectfully as I can moving forward. Again, I know I've been emotional in the past, and I understand that. And I hope that by explaining at least this one experience, because that's, let me assure you, it's not the one limited experience that I'm drawing on here as a woman, and without going further into specifics there. But to me, being a voice, especially for those that feel they can't be one right now, that is paramount to me and something I will never stop doing. And so I hope taking a more, anecdotal approach to try to explain some of these things outside of this situation, to try to exercise empathy back to those that are willing to exercise it, with respect to my perspective here, for people that are genuinely wondering, about things like power dynamics, case facts. You can go read them online, and I don't want to regurgitate them on Twitter, only because I don't want to misrepresent them with respect to either party in this case, to be fair at this point. But if you want reasoning on anything psychological here, anything at play, all of these factors, themes, and just perspective, again, as a woman in this industry that is having a really hard time reconciling all of my feelings with regards to all of this going on, I will never stop being the way that I am. So